Zimbabwe is a country where culture, tradition, and modern life are constantly negotiating for space. When it comes to sexuality, this negotiation becomes even more complex because sex in Zimbabwe is not just about pleasure or reproduction. It is deeply tied to identity, spirituality, and social order. Yet in today's world, these practices are being reshaped, challenged, and in some cases, completely reinvented. To understand sexual practices in Zimbabwe, one must look at the historical roots and then see how modernization is shifting the story. Traditionally, Zimbabwean sexual practices were closely guided by family elders and cultural expectations. For example, among the Shona people, sex education was not left to chance. Young girls were guided by their aunts, while boys were often instructed by uncles. This system ensured that sexuality was treated with respect, but also tightly controlled. Virginity was highly valued in women, and cultural tests were sometimes carried out to ensure a girl was pure before marriage. Bride price negotiations, known as lobola, were often influenced by this cultural expectation. Another key practice was chiramu, a system where in-laws had teasing relationships that sometimes carried subtle sexual undertones. For example, a man could playfully interact with his wife's younger sister in ways that suggested closeness, but were not supposed to cross into full sexual relationships. This cultural system was intended to manage boundaries, but in some cases, blurred them. In rural areas, sexual rituals were sometimes tied to spirituality. For example, fertility rituals could involve symbolic sexual acts, believed to secure blessings for families or entire communities. Certain traditional healers, known as nengas, also performed sexual cleansing rituals, especially for widows or women considered spiritually unclean after certain misfortunes. These practices, while deeply cultural, have been criticized in modern times for promoting gender inequality and, in some cases, abuse. But Zimbabwe is no longer a society that exists only in the past. Modernization, urbanization, and global influence are reshaping sexual culture in significant ways. Today, Zimbabwean youth in Harare, Bulawayo, and other cities are breaking away from many traditional restrictions. Virginity testing, for example, is becoming less common as young women challenge it as a violation of rights and dignity. Conversations about sexual freedom are now more open, with social media platforms giving space to voices that would have been silenced before. Interestingly, modernization has not entirely erased tradition, it has modified it. Lobola remains an important practice, but the negotiations around it are shifting. Some families now see it as a symbolic gesture rather than a transactional exchange. Young couples, especially those living abroad, sometimes pay lobola in installments or reinterpret it in ways that fit modern economic realities. In terms of sexual practices, modern Zimbabweans are increasingly exposed to global ideas about relationships. Western influences through movies, music, and the internet are introducing new forms of intimacy, from dating culture to cohabitation before marriage. In many cities, couples are now more likely to live together before formalizing their union, something that would have been considered taboo in traditional Zimbabwean culture. However, modernization also brings tension. Conservative elders still emphasize the value of traditional practices, arguing that Western sexual freedoms are eroding morality. Churches, which are powerful in Zimbabwe, also influence sexual culture heavily. Pentecostal movements, for instance, preach strongly against premarital sex, homosexuality, and sexual experimentation, while at the same time church youth often live double lives, traditional at home, but modern in their private choices. One of the most fascinating areas where tradition and modernity meet is in discussions about sexual health. In the past, sexual matters were rarely spoken about openly, but today public health campaigns are breaking the silence. Programs about HIV prevention, condom use, and family planning are creating space for new sexual norms. Even so, many young Zimbabweans continue to rely on traditional herbs or practices passed down from elders, blending science with culture. Technology is also transforming sexual practices. Dating apps like Tinder and WhatsApp chat groups are creating new spaces for intimacy, while online platforms provide a level of privacy that traditional Zimbabwean society rarely allowed. Yet even within these modern spaces, cultural values still influence behavior. For example, many Zimbabwean men still expect to be the dominant partner, a reflection of patriarchy that persists even in urban, modern relationships. In the end, Zimbabwean sexual practices today represent a blending of two worlds. The traditional systems of shiramu, lobola, and spiritual rituals have not disappeared, but they are being reshaped by modernization, urban living, education, and global exposure. Zimbabwe is a society in transition, where an urban youth in Harare may live by a completely different sexual code than a young woman in a rural village in Masvingo. The future of sexual traditions in Zimbabwe will likely continue to be one of adaptation. As younger generations push for freedom, equality, and openness, older traditions will either evolve or fade. What remains clear is that sexuality in Zimbabwe is not a static subject. It is alive, contested, and deeply reflective of the country's journey between heritage and modern life. Thanks for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more.